When Glenn's parents passed away, he inherited their home and all their furniture. The house he was able to sell, but most of the furniture wound up in storage. The storage facility was located on the outskirts of town, with little else around it. Glenn hated going there. It was out of the way and, frankly, creepy, especially after dark when the overhead lighting cast weird shadows and the sound of his footsteps echoed down the dim corridors. The place was okay in daylight when there were other people around, but Glenn found that on the few occasions he had to visit the place, he was inevitably alone. Always alone. Like tonight, the storage building was laid out like a gigantic X, with Glenn's space located down one of the arms, and as soon as he entered, he was struck by the smell. Struck was the right word, too, as the overpowering stench assaulted his nostrils and made him take a step back. Indeed, it was so bad it almost made him flee. Flee? Oh, smells like something died in there, Glenn said to himself, and then wondered why he thought that. For a moment, Glenn considered chucking the whole thing and going home, but he wanted his parents' old bedside table, so... Well, he just wasn't going to go away empty-handed, that's all. So, covering his nose with his handkerchief, Glenn was a fastidious man, he re-entered the building and plunged towards his storage locker. But before he reached his unit, Glenn noticed the fetid miasma seemed to be seeping out from one wing of the building. And, being conscientious as well as fastidious, he felt he had a duty to investigate. Besides, what if it was something that could damage his stuff? So Glenn groped his way down the smelly corridor, noticing that the door to one of the units at the very end appeared to be open. He looked inside, turning on the lights to get a better look, and dropped his hanky in surprise. There was a coffin in there. In fact, it was the only thing in the unit, just a plain and rather battered wooden coffin. And it was open. Glenn heard a sound from behind and turned. A figure stood at the end of the hall, a tall, ghoulish, skeletal figure, dressed entirely in black, a gaunt figure that made him think of Count Orloff in the silent Dracula film Nosferatu. The thing had a gray-green pinched face which gave it a feral rat look, while its eyes were two pulsing red orbs. And the hands, they were claws. They were long, thin, and dirty, with jagged black fingernails, pointed nails, ready to rend and tear. The thing radiated stench, the charnel reek of the grave. It stood stock still, silently regarding Glenn, and then it exploded into motion and leapt for Glenn's jugular end. And then the only sound was a gush of spurting blood. When Glenn's parents passed away, he inherited their home and all their furniture. The house he was able to sell, but most of the furniture wound up in storage. The storage facility was located on the outskirts of town, with little else around it. Glenn hated going there. It was out of the way and, frankly, creepy, especially after dark when the overhead lighting cast weird shadows and the sound of his footsteps echoed down the dim corridors. The place was okay in daylight when there were other people around, but Glenn found that on the few occasions he had to visit the place, he was inevitably alone. Always alone. Like tonight, the storage building was laid out like a gigantic X, with Glenn's space located down one of the arms, and as soon as he entered, he was struck by a wave of such intense fear, his bowels almost turned to jelly. Glenn took a step back and, for a moment, thought about leaving and going home. I'll come back when it's daylight, he told himself. But darn it all, he really wanted that table. So in spite of the vivid fear, he shook it off and went to his locker. He was just unlocking the door when he felt a presence, and looking up, saw the kids. 2 kids, an older boy and a younger girl, both dressed in black jeans, high-top sneakers, their faces hidden by their black hoodies. But Glenn recognized them immediately. The BEK, the black-eyed children. He'd never believed in them, but here they were. Without knowing what he was doing, Glenn jumped inside his unit, slamming and locking the door. Glenn stood in the dark, shaking from limb to limb. He couldn't hear them, but he was sure the kids were standing just outside. And then the voices came. Please, sir, come out. Please, sir, come out to play. Please, sir, can you give us a ride? Can you give us a ride home? Please, sir, we're late and our mummy will be worried about us. Please come out. Please come out. Glenn wasn't reassured. How do they know my name, he thought. How do they always know your name? The words quickly turned into demands, then threats, as Glenn stood shivering in the dark. But eventually they stopped. Glenn waited as long as he could stand it, then opened the door and looked out. And then, from behind, he heard, "Take us home, Glenn." Glenn forgot about the bedside table. Now, beside his bed, stand the 2 kids, an older boy and a younger girl, in identical black jeans, high-top sneakers and black hoodies, their faces corpse white, their eyes 2 pools which radiate darkness. As they croon Glenn a lullaby of nightmare. Mm-hmm. 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 If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And till midnight, pleasant dreams. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dear listener.